If you've ever gotten a paperback and you've seen the letters CS written on it or had all your commas circled and not quite sure why, chances are you probably had some comma splices. So we're going to talk about those comma splices and hopefully help you so that you don't see those marks anymore. So what a comma splice is it's essentially just when a comma is used unnecessarily, called a comma splice. Take a look at this example. The other day, I went to the store to get ingredients for guacamole. I got tomatoes, cilantro, and avocados. Then I remembered garlic. So it's a long sentence, but we've got a lot of commas in there. We've got one here, we've got one here, and we've got one here. So let's take a look at those. The other day, I went to the store to get ingredients. Now, going to the store to get ingredients is all part of the same verb phrase, so we don't want this comma here. We don't want to split up that verb phrase. And if we come here, I got tomatoes, cilantro, and avocado. So those are commas in a list. This one's okay. But if we look here then, comma, then I remembered garlic. Here we've got two independent clauses. I got tomatoes, cilantro, and avocados. And then I remembered garlic joined together with just a comma. And we know that that's not one of the comma rules. So we've got another comma splice here. So let's talk about some different ways to identify those unnecessary commas. So basic tricks are don't use a comma to split a subject and a verb up. Don't use a comma to split a compound subject. Don't use a comma to split a compound verb. And then here's the big one. Don't use a comma to join two independent clauses if that's all you're using. The simple fix to that is just to throw a fanboy in there. So we could say, I got tomatoes, cilantro, and avocados, and then I remembered garlic. And you've got a grammatically correct sentence. But if you're just using a comma to join those two independent clauses, you've got to add something else there. And finally, don't use a comma to split an independent clause from a dependent clause when the dependent clause follows it. So you don't need any mark there. Let's take a look at some examples. All right, this first one. I grow cilantro in my garden because it is one of my favorite herbs. So we've got a comma here, and that's actually a comma splice. If you look, we've got this first part of the sentence is an independent clause. It can stand on its own. It's got a subject and a verb. And afterwards, we've got a dependent clause. So we've got a subject and a verb, but it doesn't express a complete thought because it starts with one of those subordinating conjunctions. And we learned if you're using a comma to join an independent to a following dependent, it's a comma splice. You don't need a comma there. All right, let's look at this one and see if you can find out what's wrong with it. Once you get the cilantro plants growing, they are difficult to kill and get rid of. All right, so we've got two commas there. Let's look at the first one. Once you get the cilantro plants growing, you've got a dependent clause. Then you've got a comma, and it says they are difficult to kill and get rid of. You've got an independent clause here hooked by a comma, so that comma is okay to stay there. But if we move down to this comma here, we've got they are difficult to kill and get rid of. And one of our rules for avoiding comma splices is don't use a comma to split up a compound verb. Here, our subject is they. And what are they doing? They're being difficult to kill and get rid of. And we don't want this comma here splitting that verb up. So make sure that you eliminate that. Finally, did you know that coriander seeds are the seeds of the cilantro plant? And we've got a comma here. If we take a look at what it's splitting, over on this side, we've got coriander seeds, which is an object, kind of the subject of what we're talking about. And here, we've got the verb that connects to those coriander seeds. And we said one of our tricks was don't use a comma to split up the subject and the verb. So we have another comma splice here. All right, let's step over here and see if you can find the comma splices in this sentence. So we've got fats found in avocados, olive oil, nuts, and fatty fish help lower overall and bad cholesterol. They can also help with memory. All right, so let's go through our commas. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 commas. And if we look at this first set, we've got a list of items. So our commas should be here. We're good here, here, and here. They're just separating items in a list. But when we get to this comma, help lower overall and bad cholesterol. All right, we've got overall and bad both describing cholesterol. But we've got this word and here. And the comma are redundant. So we can lose the comma. In that case, it's a comma splice. All right? And then in the last sentence, they can also help with memory. Again, we see a subject over here, part of a verb phrase here, and then the other part here with the comma in between. So we want to make sure we get rid of that so our whole verb phrase can stay together. So you've taken a look at some of the most common errors with comma splices. Just remember these simple tricks. Don't use the comma to split a variety of things. You should be good to go.